when you think about it, you might have all these kind of, let's say, technical things like backups and, antiviruses and all of these things. But if you don't actually drive them in a proper way, they will be, I wouldn't say useless, but they wouldn't achieve this goal. And this is where
Mm,
governance comes into play. You actually have to organize all of these things so that they make sense. Or if I can use an example, you could have a
hmm
perfect car, really, like, I don't know, BMW, with a
hmm
perfect, engine and, perfect tires and everything. But if there is no driver, it's not going to drive very well, right? You need to have
Yeah.
a driver which is in compliance business. This is what the governance is. And this actually is what excites me, this governance part and how to organize things in security. And this is how I actually went into this compliance business, because I like organizing things. In this case, this would be security. The first thing actually you should think about is, how can this help your business?
Welcome back to the Perpetual Growth Podcast, where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Today's guest is Dejan Kosutic, an internationally recognized expert in cybersecurity governance and ISO standards, including ISO 27001, IS2, NIS2, and DORA. And we'll talk a little bit more about those technicalities and peel that back a little bit and hear a little bit in the episode. He is the founder and CEO of Advisera, a company that has helped thousands of businesses simplify compliance with global standards. And he's the host of the Secure and Simple podcast, where he demystifies complex cybersecurity challenges for consultants and CISOs worldwide. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about things like why most companies overcomplicate compliance and how simplicity actually leads to a greater competitive advantage. The real business case behind cybersecurity, what founders and operators actually need to know about ISO standards to scale securely, and how to turn regulation into ROI. I mean, how we get a return on investment, especially in today's AI-powered landscape. So Don has a rare gift. He takes something very dense and dry and makes it simple, actionable, and even inspiring. So whether you're a business owner, a consultant, or just a compliance curious, this episode is packed with clarity you didn't know you needed. So let's dive in. Dan, welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast, my friend. I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Zach. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, as my audience knows, I always like to start with this question because I think it reveals a lot about who someone really is. What does growth mean to you right now in this season of your life?
Mhm. Well, growth could be both business and personal, right?
hmm
Of course, if your revenue grows, if your profits grow, this is obviously a business, well, a purpose and a goal, which is very important. But I would say that also it's important that you grow as a person, right? That you learn
hmm
something. Because if I
hmm
was, working in a company or leading a company which is, let's say, growing, but I'm not personally growing, then this is not good enough for me. So I
hmm
always want to grow myself, to learn something new and become, let's say, a better leader or a better expert. So this is something I would say these two things together is something that I think is good growth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think there's two lenses to look at that aspect of growth through too. Is from a leadership standpoint, it's one thing to be growing as the individual, as the employee. But I think as leaders, it's equally as important for us to be creating an environment where we help to facilitate and foster that within the culture. Because,
Hmm.
without growth, really what we're in is stagnation. And if we're in stagnation, that's when employee engagement starts to drop. You start to lose fulfillment within the business. So I mean, there's the employee side where we have to take the personal responsibility to step up and be a component of driving that growth, and then also being facilitated within the leadership. And in today's changing landscape, I think it's more important than ever to stay on top of our skill sets and expertise, and really be at the forefront of what's changing. And on that note, we talked a little bit about in the introduction, like where most
Hmm.
companies overcomplicate compliance. First of all, I would love to have you just start at grassroots foundation. Like, could you help us demystify what compliance is? Um, who needs to be mindful of it? Are there any particular businesses or industries? Is it nationwide? Is it certain size or scale of business? Talk a little bit about the who, what, when, where, and why, just to help if people are unfamiliar with the subject to begin with.
Yeah. Well, compliance industry is not really, I would say, fun
Yeah, yeah,
for
right.
most people, but
Yeah.
it's I would say omnipresent, and most companies have to comply with something. Now we are in the business of cybersecurity compliance, meaning
Hmm.
various laws and regulations that are well related to cybersecurity and more widely, let's say, resilience. And yeah, there are many laws and regulations in both Europe and the States, which basically regulate this area, and more in Europe than in the States. For example, in Europe, you have this GDPR, which is a privacy regulation, which also has some things that are related to security. You also have this DORA, which is a regulation related to cybersecurity for financial entities. Then there is this NIS2, which is for critical infrastructure. But there are some general standards like ISO 27001, which is basically applicable to any company that wants to protect its data. And there are also, let's say, SOC 2, NIST cybersecurity framework. These are US standards for cybersecurity. So basically, all of these things are here to actually help companies figure out how to protect their data. And since
Hmm.
more and more companies actually rely on their IT systems to basically build their businesses and build their competitive advantage, this is something that is, I would say, more and more important in today's business. So
Hmm.
what we do is basically help these companies become compliant and do it in a way that is not, I would say, too expensive, that is not too intrusive for their current business operations, and that ultimately does help them actually grow their business because they achieve certain objectives with this, and this is how actually they can make more revenues with this kind of compliance with standards and regulations.
Hmm. Interesting. So, yeah, that's something that I had never really heard or considered. And there's several things I want to peel back here because I want to talk about like
Hmm.
the companies that want to versus need to protect, and
Uh-huh.
like really isn't a little bit of both. And then who are they protecting? Like, is it protecting the company or is it protecting the end users whose data we're acquiring, our clients and customers?
Yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, actually, let's start with those. I think that makes the most sense. If you wouldn't mind
Mhm.
speaking to that.
Yeah, I mean, the most let's say a couple of years ago, people thought, okay, only IT companies need to really kind of take care of protection their IT systems. But it became apparent, because of these data breaches in various companies that actually any type of a company needs to protect its data. From airlines to government agencies to I don't know manufacturing companies. By the way, most of the incidents are now happening within manufacturing companies, but also telecoms. Any kind of industry is affected by these cyber incidents. And
Hmm.
I mean, every cyber incident costs you money, right?
Hmm.
And directly costs you money because you have to mitigate the effects of these incidents, but also you actually get lower revenues because you are, let's say, dealing with an incident rather than finding new customers. So it does
Hmm.
make sense from the business point of view actually to invest into security. Similar like you're paying a lawyer, right? You're paying a
Hmm.
lawyer to actually protect you from legal risks, okay?
Hmm.
But if you want to protect from cyber risks, then you're basically investing into your cybersecurity, let's say, governance, but also compliance and so on.
Yeah.
So there, I mean, the various industries are, let's say, some industries are regulated by law that they have to be compliant, but most of the industries are not. And even then, it makes sense for them to protect their
Mhm.
assets.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in many respects, it's no different than putting a security system on your home. It's like you don't want to have to use it, but it's better to have it in place
Yeah.
than not, right? I don't want to come home to all my stuff missing and destroyed. And I think in many cases, just different context, it's similar in business. And speaking of context,
Mhm.
maybe you can share some examples of to make this more real world for our listeners as to some of the compliance breaches that you have witnessed and how did it affect the business? Because I mean, I know I've worked with one of the best compliance lawyers in the state, slightly different focus. It was more on the marketing
Hmm.
and sales side, not cybersecurity and governments. But we had that aspect of the business too, especially with thousands of clients coming through. And anyway, long story short, I would love to hear some of your first person experiences as to the impacts it's had on both ends of the spectrum. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
People were the they didn't have the appropriate systems in place and what happened, and then the other ones where it saved their butt and helped create a greater return.
Yeah. So there are different types of incidents that are happening. So on one hand, you could have an incident, but actually you're providing some online service, and then you actually have a hacker attack, and then you actually cannot provide this service during this time. So, for example, imagine that let's say Amazon doesn't work for a couple of days, right? Okay, it did not happen to them, but if this happened to them, this would be a huge damage for such an online retailer, right?
Yeah.
This could be one of, let's say, a type of an incident. The other type of an incident is that simply you have a leakage of data that let's say lots of your that customers data are leaked to some to basically to the public, and then you have actually this damage to your brand because people know that actually this leaked from your own servers, and then basically, and imagine that let's say this kind of data is leaking from a bank, right, where you have, I don't know, your money or your transactions, these kind of things. So it's there are different really ways to for these breaches to happen, and they can, in some cases they can actually destroy your business, completely bankrupt you. In other cases, they cause a huge damage because you have to deal with these consequences, and so it takes months actually to go back to business as usual.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and then imagine that there's multiple angles of attack, right? I mean, you're either dealing with the damages and consequences of the data or leaked data,
Hmm.
as you mentioned, how it may hurt your brand and reputation, and ultimately what that comes down
Hmm.
to is customer trust and belief, and
Yeah.
obviously revenues. I mean, if all of a sudden you're shut down for days, weeks, months, that can very easily destroy any business. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you haven't implemented the proper cybersecurity measures to begin with and are ensuring that you're compliant, then you're also potentially dealing with the government coming after you because
Hmm.
you aren't following all the appropriate measures,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and so talk
And
about like where are you mentioned some of the bigger industries. I mean, you could be in manufacturing, large sales. Like, where is there a point where this becomes a necessity, like a tipping point where you're like, if you are at this stage in business, everybody should be having this conversation or at least starting to consider what measures they should be putting in place? Or where does that conversation start for you?
hmm. Well, typically, I mean, let's start from the industries that are mandatory, actually, that must actually comply with various frameworks. Okay, financial industry one is one obvious, the obvious one. Government agencies, telecoms, health industry. So, for example, in US there is this HIPAA Act, which prescribes also these security measures, cybersecurity measures for all health information. So these are four or
Hmm.
five typical industries where you must comply with certain laws and regulations. And
Hmm.
then everything else is basically optional. So if you're an IT company, you don't necessarily need to comply with the standards. And it doesn't matter whether you're a small company, let's say three employees or 3,000 employees, it's still not mandatory, but it's becoming more and more from the business point of view, it makes more and more sense to actually invest into security. And basically how it works, for example, let's say that you are a small IT or software development company and you're working for a bank, right? You're developing, let's say, some kind of specific banking software. Now, this bank says, look, okay, fine, I'm going to buy your software from you, but you have to prove that you're secure. In other words, you have to show me some kind of certificate that you are really doing what you should be doing with your security. And then this is usually the trigger that for these kind of companies to actually go for ISO 27001. This is a cybersecurity standard, or SOC 2 in the US. And once they get certified and show to their clients, look, now we have a certificate, a proof that we are secure, then they actually see that they have new customers that they can actually grow business. So this is a direct connection, between cybersecurity and compliance and growing the business. Because you invest into security, you actually invest into your not only security, but you also invest into your marketing. And then because you have this certificate, you can actually get some new customers. In some cases, you can penetrate a completely new market.
Hmm. Those are interesting uh, observations because that's a lot of things that I don't think I necessarily would have considered too. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a component that's psychological and obviously a component that's necessity. Um, and it's not like, technology's on the decline. We're at the bottom end of an exponential bell curve. How do you stay on top of all of these, both regulatory changes, but then the actual governance and utilization of cybersecurity tools and systems? Like, do you have a proprietary software that you use or have created? Is there something that you license out? Like, what does that look like in terms of
Yeah.
implementation?
So basically, how we help our clients is we have several products. On one hand, we have courses where we teach our clients on how to actually become compliant and what do they have to do to comply with standards. We also have our software as a service, basically, which helps specifically smaller companies to be compliant. And we're also developing now some AI tools, which will also help them to become compliant. So basically, what we are doing is we are actually gathering all the information about these regulations, interpreting them, and creating into something that is usable for an everyday user who is, simply not doesn't want to be an expert, which is natural. And we actually summarize all this expertise through our products, and of course selling this as a product.
Hmm. Interesting. I like that. I mean, to me, it's a great approach. You're really leading with. I always love the old adage. It's like take a man fishing, he eats for a day; teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. So I mean,
Yeah.
your inception point is teaching people how to manage and create their own compliance and cybersecurity governments to begin with, or you can leverage
Mhm.
your SaaS tools for more vertical integration, and then AI tools for even another level. So it's really
Yep.
neat how you guys are managing this. How is it navigating to you the complexities of international cybersecurity and governments? I mean, it's one thing to specialize in the European market. It's a whole nother to bring the US in. In your mind's eye, is that like a must? I mean, are you because there is so much international business done today, and particularly in the
Mhm.
industries that you're talking about, I mean, if it's financial, government,
Yeah.
telecom, health, I mean, those are going to be global industries. Is it something where you have to have that in the degree of education and foresight to be able to work on an international level? Or where do other companies fall short?
Huh. Well, it's like this. I mean, there are really a large multitude of these standards and regulations. So through ISO standards are basically international standards. So they
Mhm.
apply in every country the same. So ISO 27001 is the same in Germany and in the States, or I don't know, in Canada. So luckily, we can actually, since we focused on this standard, we actually do not have to, let's say, worry about local, so
Mm,
to say, circumstances, because again, this standard is equally applied to any country. On
mm,
the other hand, we focus on GDPR, NIS2, DORA, which are specific European regulations. So there we actually developed our expertise specifically for these EU markets. And when it comes to regulations, we did not go to US specific laws or regulations. So when it comes to regulations, we are focused primarily on European Union. So standards are international, and this is where also we have lots of clients from North America. And actually, our biggest market for ISO 27001 is United States. Whereas for these EU regulations, obviously, we have most of the clients from Europe.
Okay. So, talk to me about something that a founder, an operator, like, really actually needs to know about ISO standards in order to scale securely.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that need to be top of mind for them?
Yeah. So if a company is considering, ISO 27001, the first thing actually you should think about is how can this help your business?
Hmm.
Because very often the very common mistake is to think about this standard from technical point of view. Okay, do I need to buy a new, I don't know, security software, or do I need to buy, or I don't know, do the backups or these kind of things? No, you should think about this from the business point of view. How can this actually help me get new clients? How can this help me achieve new revenue? How can this help me reduce the cost? Now, if you figure these things out, and if you see from the business point of view the I would say the reason to go into this, then it makes sense. Then the second step is really to figure out, what are the kind of steps that you have to go through and implement the standard. Now, when implementing the standard, what is really important to understand is that you actually have to, ISO 27001 is very flexible. So there is no kind of definition you have to do the backup, I don't know, every 6 hours. It doesn't exist, right? Basically, what the standard says, you have to do the risk assessment, find out what risks or what bad things can happen to your company, and then apply security measures, the mitigate these risks. So if you find out that there is a big risk of, I don't know, something going back, that you could lose your data, then of course you will do the backup more often, right? If such a risk doesn't exist, then you can do the backup less often. So the most important thing to understand, after finding the business reason is really that you can actually adapt these security measures based on your specific risk profile of your company. And then, having
Interesting.
these things in mind it's much easier for a business, large or small, to actually go for this standard.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, that's phenomenal awareness. I mean, considerations are the big global question to start with. How does it actually help the business? How can it actually help
Hmm.
you grow, reach new clients, achieve new revenue, reduce
Yeah.
costs? And then I find that interesting that while there is a standard, you said that it's flexible. So, like, I love what you said about it's really best to analyze the risk first, then apply the security measures based on that analysis to actually mitigate risk. So it's
Hmm.
really not just this cookie cutter plug and play, implement. I don't know what it is, like Norton or whatever cybersecurity things. Like I'm assuming there's a lot, like those are very grassroots basic compared to what a large
Yeah.
organization
Yeah.
might need. All this technical information has me curious. Where has this been how long have you been in the cybersecurity and compliance niche, and what brought you here? Like what got you excited about it? As you mentioned, it's like not necessarily the most fun thing. Oftentimes that's perspective. But what brought you here?
Yeah, actually, I'm in compliance already 20 years now. Yeah, it's a long time.
Wow.
And I was working before that in a job where I was also in charge of IT systems and organization. And funnily enough, security is a kind of combination of, okay, of course, technical security, but also this organizational security or governance, as we usually
Mm-hmm.
call it. Because when you think about it, you might have all these kind of, let's say, technical things like backups and, antiviruses and all of these things. But if you don't actually drive them in a proper way, they will be, I wouldn't say useless, but they wouldn't achieve this goal. And this is where
Mm-hmm.
governance comes into play. You actually have to organize all of these things so that they make sense. Or if I can use an example, you could have a
Mm-hmm.
perfect car, really, like, I don't know, BMW, with a
Mm-hmm.
perfect, engine and, perfect tires and everything. But if there is no driver, it's not going to drive very well, right? You need to have a
Yeah.
driver which is in compliance business. This is what the governance is. And this actually is what excites me, this governance part and how to organize things in security. And this is how I actually went into this compliance business, because I like organizing things. In this case, this would be security.
Mm. Yeah, that's fascinating. Uh, what did you do before?
I had several businesses. I was in logistics, in banking, so I worked in a couple of companies before.
Was there a circumstance, an event, something that brought your attention and awareness towards cybersecurity and compliance, or were you doing that within banking, or like what was the inspiration to say, well, I need to build a business and 20-year career around this now?
Yeah, I was always in IT, and when I was thinking about the career change, then I actually talked to a colleague, and he basically said, and I was actually thinking into going into consulting, and he told me, look, these cyber standards are now becoming more and more important. This was back in 2004 or five, and I thought to myself, look, this could be interesting. I never worked in security until then. I worked primarily with IT. But it could be interesting, and I started exploring going for some courses, and there you go. It's 20 years afterwards. I'm still in this, and actually I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
It's a very fast-moving area. It's now becoming mainstream, which of course it wasn't 20 years ago, and
Mhm.
there is a huge amount of work to be done here.
Which, I on one hand, I mean, it's great for your business, which I absolutely love, and on the other hand, it frustrates the hell out of me that the thought that never escapes or that I can't seem to escape is if there's all these people that are trying to acquire our intellectual property and data and access to our assets and all these different things, like if they just took the time and effort that they put into doing something illegal and actually put it into building a legitimate business, they'd probably have a pretty damn good business because the amount of
Yeah,
energy, effort, wisdom they're putting into it, it's just they're putting it the wrong direction. It just blows my mind. I'm like, so it sucks that we have to do it, but I'm glad that there are people that are learning how to protect the rest of us because it's
yeah.
definitely an area where I could not see myself getting excited about having to learn it, especially to the degree of depth that you
Hmm.
have. And then, like you say, with how quickly times are changing.
Yeah.
So thank you for protecting the rest of us and finding the beauty in that landscape. So what I would love to do is just shift gears for a second. So I mean,
Hmm.
you've really built a brand and a business around simplicity, and especially in a world where it's known for red tape and complexity.
Oh
And
yeah.
what I would love to do is just throw a few rapid fire questions your way, all focused on how
Sure.
founders and leaders can simplify and scale. Does that sound good?
Sure.
All right,
Sure. Of
fantastic.
course.
So, one question, what's one compliance myth that you wish every CEO would stop believing?
Well, I would say that exactly this, that compliance is so complex that it's not achievable, and
Hmm.
this is simply wrong. I mean, if you, I would say scale it down to your that it fits your company size and your company business, then it's I would say very achievable with I wouldn't say negligible effort, but I would say with minimum effort or certainly lower effort than most companies expect.
Yeah. So, I mean, biggest takeaway there is it's only as complicated as we make it. And, when we're asking a better quality question, we get a better quality of answer, and it allows us to make simpler decisions so you can implement a lot more strategically. Um, I think that's
Yep.
a really, really wise insight. So,
Yeah.
what's a red flag that a company's current cybersecurity approach is just too complicated?
Well, for example, if they're let's say we work a lot with these smaller companies like SaaS companies and such, and if you're let's say a company SaaS company of 10 employees and if you cannot complete your project for initial implementation for 27,001 in let's say 3 months, this means that you are overcomplicating. And
Mm,
for example, you could write again backup policy, right? One
mhm,
document where you describe how you will do the backup. You can write it on a one page, or you can write it on 20 pages. For a small company, it's enough that you have a one-page policy, right?
mhm,
Which is short, simple, concise, very clear. But if you're writing too many of these longer documents, of course you're not going to be finished in 3 months. So this is a red flag. If this takes too long, this means that they are complicating things, that they're trying to be better, but it's not clear why they want to be something more than that they should be doing.
mm. Those are really interesting insights. So to me, it comes back to the concept of value chain, right? It's like any given
Hmm.
process in the company, the more links in the chain, the more steps that we add, the greater the probability that one of those links in the chain is going to break, and it's going to lead to lack of customer fulfillment, missed communications, lost revenues, whatever. So how do
Hmm.
we take something that may be overly complex and simplify it down to the shortest path from A to B? Which is really wise.
Hmm.
And another thing I think I'm hearing, and I want just to oversimplify for our listeners, is there's the cybersecurity and there's the compliance. There's the protection of the data and assets, and then there's making sure that we are compliant with regulations and protecting our business from that side. Is that the best ways to oversimplify those two buckets, cybersecurity compliance?
Well, basically, the way we approach it, we basically tell our clients that they should use this so-called lean approach, right?
Hmm.
Lean basically is usually related to some other things, but we like to use this lean approach to
Hmm.
compliance. And we say basically, look, you should always go for the minimum. Don't try to achieve the maximum because, I mean, for example, this risk analysis that we spoke about, if you want to do, let's say, an absolute correct risk analysis, it will take you, I don't know, months or years to actually achieve it. Well, this is not actually necessary to achieve a good security. Start small, start with a small risk analysis, and then fix those risks and introduce these security measures, and then basically move on next. And then you will, in, I don't know, a couple of months, then you will add a couple of more and so on. So this is this lean approach. You start with small, you actually have achievable small steps where you have clear goals, and then you move on and actually you build, this is called continuous improvement in these ISO standards, and you perpetually actually build this better and better security over time. So when you have this lean approach, then you basically achieve, this good balance between these technical controls, between this governance, and you actually achieve a better security ultimately.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I like that. One of my favorite sayings: starting small doesn't mean you're playing small. And in a slightly different context, but there's a lot of wisdom in that. Go with the minimum. Like, start with the first step, build and introduce that one segment, ensure that it's compliant, and then move on to the next. It's like people where you will get overwhelmed just trying to look at that entire picture at the exact same time. Well, we don't paint. Every painting is created one brushstroke at a time. So why not approach our business compliance and security in that same way? On that same note, so what's one simple step that most companies could take this month that would drastically improve their compliance position?
Well, okay, first of all, again, I would look at this from the business point of view. I would actually think about from our business strategy, where can cyber help our business strategy or help our company achieve better things? For example, we might actually be looking with our products towards some new markets. And if this market is sensitive for data privacy, for, let's say, security, these kind of things, then introducing a security certificate could help our business. On the other hand, we might be developing some new products. And again, if the consumers that actually use these products are, again, sensitive towards their data being protected, then we could, introduce some, let's say, security features like, two-factor authentication, these kind of things into our products. So cyber can actually help business. And this is what often people are missing about cyber. Cyber is considered a cost and overhead, whereas if you turn things around, it can actually help you grow your business. And I would say this should be the first thing to think about. How can cyber grow your business?
Yeah, I love that simple question too. It reminds me of a conversation I was having with a friend of mine. Actually, we were interviewed on here too. She's a client as well. I mean, she's an internationally certified HR professional, and very obviously completely different industries, but there is a similarity in that mindset where oftentimes organizations are looking at HR and integration of human resources and compliance standards and everything as a box to check, something that they have to do because the government says so, because now they're at 50 employees here in the US. But the reality is, if you flip that script and start asking a more powerful question, how can this actually become an investment that helps the company grow and scale and fosters a greater culture and solves all these other problems? And it's just shifting how we are looking at things. And I love that you have that same wisdom to take that step back and really analyze, what good can this bring to the business and turn something that's otherwise less fun into something not. Now, for our listeners, if you guys are listening right now and thinking, okay, this actually makes sense, but where do I start? Dan and his team at Advisera have created one of the largest libraries of free ISO compliance resources anywhere online. So from toolkits to documentation templates and step-by-step courses, you can grab a ton of value for free at advisera.com. And we'll make sure we have that in the link in show notes. And if you're in the consulting or fractional CISO space, check out Dan's podcast, Secure and Simple. It's a go-to for anyone navigating compliance standards and governance with clients and all those things. So really, really powerful. And I'm curious, Dan, are you finding, I mean, you provide so much value, and like I mentioned, you have that spectrum of do it yourself to kind of done what you've done for you. What do most of your clients want? Like, are they like, I don't want to learn this stuff? Would you just take care of it for me? Or are there more, I imagine there's somewhat dependent on the space. You get somebody in IT and then maybe like, oh, let's build somebody internally to help manage it. Or is it oftentimes kind of a combination of the two? Well, what do you see the most desire around?
Yeah, we have, I would say, at least two different types of customers. So one types of customers are companies that actually want to implement this compliance in their own companies. And for them, they're looking for, I would say, affordable solution and a solution that doesn't complicate things, right? That
Hmm.
actually it can help them achieve their goal, being compliant, without too much spending of their internal resources, right? So
Hmm.
this is basically one target group. The other target group that we work with are consultants, and basically these guys are helping their clients become compliant, and they actually learn from us. They actually obtain the know-how from us, and they use our tools to work with their clients. Now they are very different because there you have to. They're interested primarily to learn how this is done, and they want to become experts themselves. So they're basically buying knowledge from us. So
Hmm.
depending on these two target groups, there are different needs, and we of course have to cater to both of them.
Yeah, no, I love that how you've really spanned that gap and you know your audience clearly and well, and you know exactly what they need in order to help protect their business, their
Mhm.
people, their IP and assets. As we wrap up today's episode, Dan, is there a tip, a strategy, a consideration, a primary question? Is there, what's one thing that you would love to bring the audience's attention to, or teach them, or share that would help either shed some more clarity around cybersecurity and compliance and what you do, or how to implement, or what questions to ask? I mean, is there anything outside of what we've already discussed and shared that you feel like would be is like I got to get this out of my head?
Well, I mean, not directly related to what we do, but I can, use an example from a very
Hmm.
famous company, Apple. And
Yeah.
they're not kind of cybersecurity company. They're obviously a company building beautiful products, right?
Hmm.
iPads and iPhones and all this stuff. And when you think about it, what they are famous for, of course, they're famous for their product design, about all these apps that are around, but they're also famous for their ultimate care for privacy of their customers, right? When you think
Hmm.
about it, they care the most about not giving data away to the government or to other let's say interested parties. They always protect this with the highest level of encryption and so on. So it's probably third or fourth most important kind of let's say feature of their products. They have, and they have this like for 10 or 15 years in the at one of the most important things. So this is actually the way how a company strategically thinks about cyber, and how this cyber can help their products and their sales and their brand ultimately, right?
Hmm.
And again, cyber is not their primary thing. It's maybe number three or four, but still, it's very important part of the mix of how actually this company grows, and what actually their clients are after. So I would say,
Yeah.
if everyone is thinking about how like Apple, this would be a much safer world.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, so I love that story, and that's a fantastic example. And I would love to recap some of my big takeaways from today. Is
Mhm.
number one, a lack of compliance in cybersecurity has the potential to damage the brand, hurt revenues, slow down, or even shutter business altogether. Or it can help your brand, ensure customers know that you have their back, improve reputation, and enhance revenues. And a lot of it comes to just how you are looking at the problem. Are you looking as a problem, or are you looking as an opportunity for growth? Biggest
Yeah.
sectors that you see where it's an absolute must are financial, government, telecom, healthcare because of HIPAA compliance standards, and some manufacturing, and everybody else is it's up to you to decide whether or not
Mhm.
you integrate it. But again, if we're asking
Yeah.
a powerful question, we've got a better outcome. And different ways you guys can help is through the education or actual implementation, not to oversimplify. And I think that becomes the most important question. Like, how can this help your business? How can this actually
Yeah.
help get you new clients, achieve new revenue, reduce costs? And on that same note, it's not set it and forget it. Like you say, you can have the beautiful car in the driveway, but you actually have to have a driver. And we, just like needing somebody to drive that car, need somebody to guide this cybersecurity and compliance. Otherwise, it's not really going to be being fully utilized or let alone optimized to protect the company at the highest
Yeah.
levels.
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Dan, I appreciate how you've made something most founders avoid, or taken something that most founders avoid and turned it into a real growth conversation. Now, if you guys are a listener and today's episode sparked questions, or you want to explore how to protect and scale your business through compliance and cybersecurity, the best place to start is Dan's site at advisera.com. It's ADVISERA.com. And again, we'll have that in the show notes. And you can also reach out directly to Dan on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure that we've got a link to his profile. And again, on his website, you guys can find the resources, toolkits, insights, lots of stuff that'll save you time, money, and risk. And I think any business owner, that should perk up your ears just a little bit. Now, as always, thank you for tuning into the Perpetual Growth Podcast. If today's episode challenged your thinking, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review so you don't miss what's next. Until next time, remember, growth doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. We'll see you soon.